Hey everybody, it's time for story time. Yes, today I wanted to talk about the first days I ever spent in Portugal and an unforgettable trip to Fatima. I went to Lisbon to do my first study abroad program there in 2012 when I was 19, turning 20. I had previously done a couple of study abroad programs, so it was not the first time that I had traveled out of the country or by myself. At that point, I was pretty used to how those sort of things functioned, but this was the first time that I'd be spending such an extended period of time out of the house. So as I've talked about in other videos a little bit, I had to find my own accommodations because there were no student residences available for these study abroad students. Therefore, it was recommended to us that we find a room in an apartment. Now, there was another student doing the same study abroad program as I was, so I had a study abroad partner of sorts, and we decided to help each other out through our process of getting our visas and getting to Portugal. That included getting an initial apartment in Lisbon, and for that we had to turn to the internet. Because neither of us had been to Lisbon before, we didn't know that much about the city, and so we just had to rely on what we could read about on the internet, a little bit of help from other students, and Google Maps. I had to comb through all of the sites that were available to me and find a room in an apartment, and so I did that. My study abroad partner and I decided to take advantage of the fact that he would be arriving in Lisbon about a week before I did so that he could go look at apartment options. Now, I had found a few options on the internet and he had found his own, and so he went to look at them and ultimately ended up deciding on one option that I had found near the Legendado metro station. That was fine, and it was central enough and was on the same line as my university, so I thought it was fine, and I was glad that it was taken care of. Now, the first night that I was going to be in Lisbon, I wasn't going to go directly to the apartment because I was supposed to get to Lisbon in the evening. That meant that I wasn't going to have enough time to meet with the owner of the apartment and pay my deposit and all of that stuff. It was going to just be easier for me to stay at a hostel and take care of my belongings in the morning. So when it came down to my flight to Lisbon, I had opted for a European carrier. So although everybody has their preferences when it comes to flying, I'm not really a big fan of American carriers. But that left my only option as a connection in London, which was going to put my total travel time at around 18 hours. I had an initial 9.5, 10-hour flight between Denver and London, and then another 2 hours in the air between London and Lisbon. Now, I don't know about you, but when I fly, I have a very hard time sleeping. So I was awake for essentially the entire time. So by the time I finally landed in Lisbon, it was the evening, it was dark outside, and I was running on empty. I was running on the adrenaline and the excitement of traveling finally, and that's how I got to my hostel. I found my bus from the Lisbon airport and got to Baixa, where I was going to be staying. I was fortunate when I got to my hostel because it was right about dinner time, and they offered a hostel dinner that you could pay for, where you could eat and drink with the people staying at the hostel and socialize and have a good time. That hostel also offered tours of the city at night so that you could see some of the highlights of the nightlife in Lisbon, and so I decided that I was also going to go ahead and do that. I wanted to take advantage of being in a new place and meeting new people, and I was also still just on this adrenaline high of traveling. Clearly, the smarter option would have been just to eat dinner and go to bed and prepare myself to move things and do more in the morning, but being 19, I clearly did not think that far ahead. So everything was fine, and dinner was served, and there was bottomless wine, and I had a great time at dinner, getting to know some of the people from the hostel, talking a little bit about my story, and just generally socializing. And we did the same thing all throughout the evening when we went out for the group tour. But suffice it to say, by the end of that tour, by the time we got to the hostel, I was done, as one gets when you go out on the town. Now, I am the kind of person where I either don't get hangovers or I get hangovers that make me want to die, and in this case, it was the latter when I woke up the next morning. Except that when I went downstairs to have breakfast, I saw my study abroad partner and a new friend that I had made at the hostel, and they were talking about going to Fatima. I didn't know anything about Fatima, but they suggested that I go with them, so I decided to eat breakfast, organize my things, and go with them. Now, if you are unfamiliar or, like me, neither Catholic nor Christian, you might not know that Fatima is considered a holy city where a miracle occurred in Portugal. It was the site of a papal visit in Portugal not very long ago that practically shut the country down. It is a big Catholic deal. And I thought, why not? It's a new place, and I like to explore new things. Except that everything started to go downhill by the time we got on the bus to Fatima. I was terribly, terribly, terribly hungover, and I was starting to get sick, and it only got worse by the time we got there and as we were walking through. Fortunately, I was able to appreciate the sights and appreciate learning about the history of where we were going, but needless to say, I don't recommend going to a holy town with a hangover. I was sick the entire day, and other than traveling around, it was not an altogether pleasant experience. And then at the end of all of that, I had to schlep all of my luggage back to my new apartment. So my first 24 hours in Portugal were quite a whirlwind. I didn't necessarily make the greatest decisions, but I entered the country with a bang. Now, it didn't take me very long thereafter to get settled, and I was fine, and the day after that, I went to Belém and got to see the main sights and stuff there. So if there's any moral to this story, it's if you are running on empty, maybe don't go out and party, especially not when you're in a new place for the first time. So that's all I've got for this story time. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, if you found it entertaining or otherwise interesting, leave me a thumbs up down below. You might think about subscribing to my channel if you're not already. I make videos about food, culture, and the Portuguese language, including, indeed, stories about my time in Portugal. All of those videos you can find in playlists directly on my channel or in the eye above, and I will see you next time.